You're watching Update from the Hill. I'm Mark Rockburn. Joining me as always is Northumberland-Peterborough South MPP, David Piccini. And David, thanks for joining me again this week for another episode of Update or Queen's Park Report. I know it's been a busy week, so let's get right at it. And I thought, David, we'd talk about the fact that would I be safe to say, for me to say that you've probably been busier now than you were 6 months ago as an MPP?
Yes, definitely, Mark. It's been very busy. COVID has impacted everybody's lives, whether you're a student, a senior, small business owner. There's supports available from one level of government or another. People don't really care where they're getting that information. They just want it and they need help. So our office has been absolutely inundated. We've been using, we've also been proactive, Mark, as well. I think when you try and get out, it's like any business too. The more you push, the more outward facing you are, the more you communicate, the more business one drives. And you know, it's my job to communicate out with constituents. So whether it's tonight's sector specific consultation with small business, non-for-profits, or the Zoom town halls I do in each municipality, it gives people the opportunity to stay in touch, but it also spurs motivation because someone will tell their friend, did you know about this? We'll call the MPP's office. So you know, it's been it's what I ultimately got elected to do, and it's been a challenging time for us all, but it's also been a time where I've been able to connect with constituents, talk to them about the supports available, and help collectively as we as a community get beyond the pandemic that we're in.
You stated a number of times, and just again, David, when we've had these taping these shows, that you know it's what you're elected to do, but nowhere when you were elected did you ever pull out a book where you're going to have to deal with a pandemic. So who do you lean on, or who do you get support from? Because I'm sure there's not many people in the House that still have that were around during the SARS time. So who do you look for some help with?
Well, I lean on, obviously, on our premier. I'm in fairly regular communication. My cabinet colleagues, the Minister of Finance and others, colleagues across government. But you know, I've had some good calls with former parliamentarians who live here, people like David Tabucci, who lives in our community. You know, I've spoken with former members as well. And I think from my perspective as well, I seek advice out from folks in our community. When I have a business question, something on manufacturing, we'll really lean on the experts that are in our community. As far as navigating from a political perspective, a global pandemic, I think the unique nature that we find ourselves in here globally, how it's affected supply chains, and the uniqueness of COVID-19 is so. You know, we're moving quickly. We're looking at lessons learned, whether it be in long-term care, whether it be PPE, sourcing PPE. We've been quick to respond as a government, and I think you know, our central procurement now, looking at developing the technology through Ontario together. As far as I know, I don't think we've seen that across the country. I think Ontario has been very quick to respond, and I think we'll be well positioned going into the future. But I mean, I lean on my staff. I lean on my family, as so many do in our community. So it's not really one individual, rather a collective, and very fortunate to have a close-knit community.
Let's talk about your staff a little bit, David, because of the fact that they went in this as well with jumping in this with both their feet, as not knowing how to deal with this and freshly learning on how to run an MPP's office as well.
Yeah, so as you know, a young MPP, I think one of the youngest in our riding's history, going in with the team, we built a great team, a staff team, and you know, I even go beyond have Ontario Legislative Internship Program, intern in our office as well, and you know, we engage volunteers to support as well. So we've got a robust office, a phenomenal staff that I really lean on. I mean, I'm but one person, and without my staff, I'd be a nobody. So they're the backbone that I lean on. Have been incredibly supportive. Our we've got a young team, and I lean on the experience of one of my staff who's worked over 20 years, Bonnie, in my office, who does casework. And I know everyone, Paige, Madeline, Mike, everyone in the office, lean on all of them to support me during these times. And obviously my support in Toronto through Tori as well in my ministry work that I do with our colleges and universities. But I think essential to serving the community is a staff with an attitude that I try to impart, which is that, we're here to serve the people. It's public service. And I think a lot of the time people forgot the service element of it. People, you see your politicians in the public, but the service element is really key. My boss is you, Mark. It's the people watching the show. And I take that very seriously. And whether we're able to get the immediate response or not, Mark, even from time to time, if we take a little longer than I would like, I try and be very forthright with people, connect them with that information, and take an attitude that it's not passing the buck. When you come to this office, we will endeavor to support you, whether it's working hard. You've got a boat launch. You want to get out to your property. It's boat access only. I'll pick up the phone. I'll call the mayor. We'll talk about this. Or if it's a federal issue, we'll call the MP or just try and directly support you if we can. So we've got a very positive attitude as a staff, and everybody understands that they're there to help people.
How's your response been, David, from the community when they're calling in? Because obviously everybody is trying to get themselves up to speed on what programs are available to be able to help them during this time of COVID-19.
Yes, it's been good. I early on developed a website called covidsupports.ca, which triages all of the federal provincial supports available to one. It's updated daily to this day. And a great example of community sort of coming together. A local student approached me and said, I saw your website, understand the supports available to me as a student. I'm working with a local group out of Western University, and we've developed an artificial intelligent chat bot function. I've now rolled that out on the website, working with this student who said, hey, how can we help? It's Chatitude, and it's a young boy named Liam in our community, very bright, go-getter, and we've now rolled out a chat function on the website that can help people navigate. So you can type in a live question, I'm a student, help, boom, up will pop information on how to apply for the student supports. If I'm a senior, a small business, commercial rent, etc. So developing that website, again, the Zoom town halls, zeroing in with the mayors at a very local level has really helped. And now the sector-specific consultations, leaning on work with our chamber, counties. It's been a very collaborative effort. And I think I would take two takeaways. One, the community coming together and the community supports. And two, the second takeaway would be as constituents, I think people appreciate the fact that their politicians at different levels and of different stripes are really working together, the public policy makers. And that makes for better public policy when you're really looking at it from multiple angles.
You're watching Queen's Park Report. I'm Mark Rockburn. Joining me as always is Northumberland-Peterborough South MPP David Piccini. And David, you led me right into my next question, which was going to be the fact that if one thing has come out of this pandemic so far, it's the fact that coming together, as you stated, not only federal politicians working with provincial politicians at all levels in all areas, as well as mayors in this community coming together and taking boundaries down, but also the innovation that's coming out of the community, such as you with your website. This community has certainly come together as one.
No, it has, and I think I was honored yesterday to have the opportunity to rise in the legislature to speak about the Northumberland Producers Alliance, developing the face shields. I think that's another great example of coming together and sourcing the material, the manufacturers, obviously, the remarkable team at V13, and really, leveraging on little pockets of 3D printing expertise around Northumberland, around Durham, feeding in and being able to support. They came up with a sophisticated website, allocating a certain amount to the frontline healthcare professionals, to our first responders, to grocery stores, small businesses. I own a mom and pop grocery store, and we don't have access to these PPEs, but the young men and women that get up every day and work the tills, they need to feel protected. So it was an immediate response, ramping up capacity. I think a 280% increase in production since April. I mean, Mary, it's incredible, and that's our community coming together and fundraising, and it met an incredible need. And that immediate need when COVID was first declared a global pandemic, and the global supply chains were rocked to their core, that immediate period of time, our community stood tall, responded to the call. So that's a great local example.
Shifting gears a little bit, David, here now, and going to talk about the fact that the legislature resumed sitting again this week. Talk about your posting yesterday that you did through Instagram, and the fact that why you think that legislature needs to sit, and the reason that it needs to continue to sit during this time.
Well, we've been clear. The Premier from day one has been very straight with Ontarians and been very forthright in both the things that we need as a community and what he is hearing from Ontarians. And part of that is a real acknowledgement that we have to work together. We're a Team Ontario, and that Team Ontario includes all members of the legislature. We've been working productively with NDP, with the independent members. And I've been in conversations with NDP colleagues of mine who've been very, very productive. Our critic in colleges and universities has come forward with good ideas. A good friend of mine, NDP member out of Kingston, we've been talking about abattoirs and our processing abilities as a province. So I think that in all of this, if there's a silver lining, it's been that a real productive and working collaborative relationship. And I think when Ontarians look at that, they've seen real leadership in Ontario, and we should be proud. And by that I mean leadership in the entire legislature. I don't know if we've seen that really throughout the country, or certainly when you look down south of the border. But when you look to Ontario, it's a collaborative working environment. We're holding question period where the opposition is holding us to account, and I think that's important that we are enabling. And we were doing this long before they were doing it at a federal level. It is allowing the opposition the ability to question government, to hold us to account, to work together to make advice. And as a result, you saw the opposition vote in favor of our action plan. And I mean, find me a time in Ontario's history where the NDP has supported a conservative budget. I think it's, I think that speaks to the collaborative spirit in Ontario right now, and one that we need if we're to get through this together.
David, we're up on our first break. When we come back, we're going to continue on just so viewers know how the legislature sits currently, how you're practicing social distancing, and we'll talk about as well the cancellation of the rest of the school year. You're watching Queen's Park Report. I'm Mark Rockburn. Don't go away for the second half of the show. Welcome back to Queen's Park Report. I'm Mark Rockburn. Joining me as always is Northumberland-Peterborough South MPP David Piccini. And David, just before the break, we were talking about the legislature going back to sit. Obviously, questions are always arising about social distancing. How's that working within the legislature?
That's a great question. So we now, traditionally, you'd have to be in your seat to both vote and to pose a question. And it's been interesting because, whereas we once before you'd run to your seat if there was a vote count and the clock was winding down, it's a little mad dash to dive in your seat to get there in time, or if you're speaking and in the legislature, I mean, to be recognized, you have to be in your official seat. So that's all changed. I think a student of history, I don't really recall a period of time before where you could speak outside of that. So you can speak anywhere in the legislature. We're staggered apart, both vertically, horizontally staggered. We have a limited number of people in the legislature. We have some people on standby, obviously, as well. And we take turns going in as a team. So, I'm with a specific group, and we go in as well when there's pieces of legislation that are being introduced that I'm speaking to, for example, in the college and university realm that I support as parliamentary assistant. So we do that, and it's been challenging in that you haven't had all your colleagues around, and it's certainly I miss my colleagues and the opportunity to speak with them, to pick their brains on, you're from rural Ontario, you're in a community similar to Northumberland, how are you dealing with this issue locally? What are your mayors telling you? And so I do miss a bit of that, but it was good to see everyone over the past 2 days. We had some good debate. We got a chance to sit down with the Minister of Education relative to some of the issues constituents were flagging with me, parents, teachers, and it was good to be back.
Obviously, David, talking with the Minister of Education, the announcement was made this week to cancel the rest of the school year. I don't think it was a big surprise to many that was the proper decision to make, or the decision your government was going to make. You talked about what you were hearing from residents and teachers. What were you hearing from them on this issue?
So I was hearing two things. One, from parents and families, that any measured gradual reopening of the economy needs to be go hand in hand with childcare, daycare, camps. So I was hearing that. I was also hearing from families the challenges of educating their children while working, making those challenges. And I've got to say, parents have been stepping up big time to support their children over the past number of weeks, months, working online. From students, the inability you often learn not just through your teacher, but through your peers, and the inability to be in that classroom setting, to be in, you're learning at recess, you're learning out in the yard, you're learning playing sports with one another, you're learning doing group exercises in the classroom, when your teacher will pose a question or a solution they're looking for a group response to. So there was certainly a frustration there, just a frustration of not being able to see your friends. So we understand that, but first and foremost, I heard from parents that they weren't going to send their kids back unless they felt it was safe. And so that's the health and safety of our youth, of our next generation, is the number one priority. From educators as well. Because your children aren't in your class just doesn't mean you stop worrying as an educator. And I've spoken to many remarkable teachers who are personally driving to the home of maybe a young boy or girl who doesn't have the traditional support structure of a traditional family, let's say, and they're going through great lengths to support that individual. And I commend them for that. We're concerned about the rural broadband challenges. Obviously, a lot of our curriculum is downloadable. We have Wi-Fi hotspots, and we're working to address that. But we live in a rural community, and that poses challenges as well. Getting up, for some, working on the farm with your parents now and doing education at the same time. So there are a number of challenges, but ultimately this needs to be done in a safe manner. I think if we look at other jurisdictions where there's been immediate outbreaks in schools since reopening, again, another proof point that our measured approach, I believe, is working. Announcing additional spec ed supports for special education, rolling out multi-million-dollar commitment to mental health over the summer months, enabling students to a continuity of education to stay refreshed over the summer. I think as we look to the fall, we're going to continue to have discussions there. I'm leaning whether a teacher just posted on my wall, and I'm asking for an opportunity to sit down and chat, or parents or students. A young, excellent student out of ENSS in Brighton who sent me a text the other day. This is still a fluid, evolving situation, but the decision yesterday to cancel the remainder of the school year was a difficult one, but the right one.
Absolutely, I agree with that. The decision to cancel was the right decision to make by your government for the protection and safety of all involved, not only the kids, not only the teachers, but custodial staff, office staff, the whole entire school board organization.
Good point. Yeah, that's a good point. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say yet the entire structure, whether it's our secretaries, our custodians, everybody. I mean, I know you get involved in education because you care deeply and passionately about education, and that's from everybody involved, from the board right down to each individual school and everyone employed within. And it is difficult, unprecedented times we find ourselves in, but we are coming together. I'm seeing the real community spirit coming together to support our next generation. But I'd also say, we're also responsibly looking at things this summer, like camps, how we would roll out camps in a smaller sort of more, while respecting physical social distancing, how we would do that. So we're looking at that, and childcare as well. I think those are our priorities now, looking forward into the summer months. From a college and university perspective, I'm working, Minister Romano and I are on the phone all the time with our residents, with our faculty, with everybody in the post-secondary realm, our Indigenous institutes, talking with them about, over the summer months. And we're having the opportunity to look at, in a very much more focused, confined group, what September will look like, and maybe testing some of those theories over the summer. So, I mean, just because there's been a cancellation either at K-12 or in post-secondary, don't think for a second, I don't want viewers to think we're not actively looking at solutions and piloting things in a safe and responsible manner so that you can, because ultimately people want assurances. In the fall, when my son or daughter go back to school at any level, will they be safe? And so we're working on that.
Shifting a little bit, David, to post-secondary education, and let's talk about the fact that yesterday it was announced that OSAP applications are now open for 2021 school year. When do they historically open, I guess, or for applications to start being submitted?
Mm-hmm. No, I know, it's opening now. And certainly opening it up a little more time for families was a critical component for the government, and giving a little more room. I know that the student supports over the summer have been critical for students who are leaning on employment and who may not have it, and looking at the OSAP structure to be able to provide a blended model, obviously, of grants and loans. Our government's made a real point of making sure it's there for those who really need it most, and that there are going to be changes. And we as the government have to look at the changes relative to income of the last number of months have rocked certain households, and that is going to have to be factored in. And ultimately, from a public policy perspective, it's early days, and I will report back to you on our next show on what the uptake has been and what we're seeing on our end, but making sure that we're not, from a public policy perspective, and as a government, barriers to higher education because of the circumstances one finds themselves in response to COVID-19. So, making sure that we're looking at those supports. We immediately provided a $25 million right out the door to universities, looked at supporting we're cognizant of our rural and northern and where we had socioeconomically the most disadvantaged, and that money translated into direct student supports in the immediate aftermath of COVID-19. So that was critical. Implementing additional research funding now as we look to find a cure. Again, government announced over $20 million there, and are actively working. Our labs are critical in our research institutions. So we're working, but ultimately, those supports for students in the form of a loan or a grant are there, and they're important, and it's going to be important in the coming weeks.
David, we have roughly about a minute and 45 seconds left here. Let's talk quickly about the fact that religious services can start to open up, not inside the church, but they can start gathering in parking lots for religious services.
Yes, thank you very much for raising that, Mark. Faith is an important uh, an important piece for all of us of our lives, and I know my personal faith and others. During difficult times like this, it's important that we have the ability to worship, to gather, and do that. And while we can't gather in the traditional sense now, being able certainly to in a number of those Zoom town halls that I've had with mayors, speaking with pastors, with reverends, and others in our interfaith community within Northumberland-Peterborough South, it was important that we look towards that. And I very much leaned on the support of our ministry and guidance on how this could be done in a responsible manner. And I think this was a very important piece for many who in our community who lean on their faith and their belief, and the ability to practice that is core to our country and our province. And so that was an important thing to work on. I know I provided some of our local feedback to our command table, have had those discussions with public health, and it's important for many, and something that, I was just driving last weekend just to pick up a curbside pickup in one of our small businesses in Brighton, and saw many gathering, and that's an important piece for our community and for the fabric of our society.
You've been watching Queen's Park Report. I'm Mark Rockburn. We'll see you in 1 week's time.